I never thought the sound of a lock refusing to click could make my knees buckle. But there I was, July heat pressing down, groceries wilting in my arms, fumbling with the key to my daughter's front door. My key. Or so I thought. Click. Jiggle. Nothing. I tried again, slowly this time. A twist. A push. Still nothing. The house stood quiet beyond the glossy black door. No movement inside. No lights. Just the reflection of my stunned face in the front window. I stared at it like a stranger might. I set the groceries down and knocked. Once. Twice. A third time, louder. Then I heard it. Feet on the stairs. Slow. Reluctant. A shape moved behind the door's frosted glass. Then, the lock turned once, then twice, and the door creaked open an inch. My daughter, Lila, peered out with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Mom," she said, breathless. "What are you doing here?" I blinked. "What do you mean?" "I just came from the market." "You asked for lemons." Her face flickered with something. Panic? Guilt? I wasn't sure. But she quickly stepped outside and pulled the door closed behind her, sealing the house off behind her like it held a secret. "You should have texted first," she said, smoothing her hair like this was a casual inconvenience, not a barricade. "Today's not really a good day. You caught us off guard." My throat tightened. "Lila, why doesn't my key work?" She hesitated. "Did you change the locks?" Behind her, I heard footsteps again, heavier ones. Then her husband, Adam, appeared in the doorway, arms crossed, brow furrowed like I'd broken in. "We thought it was time," he said flatly. "It's been 3 months since the transfer, Mary. We needed privacy." Transfer. The word cracked through me like a slap. I had signed the deed to this house over to them as a wedding gift. My home. The one I bought after my divorce. The one with the kitchen I remodeled tile by tile. The creaky floorboard in the hallway that always made me smile because Lila used to dance there in her socks. The place where I'd stayed up for nights on end during her teenage years, waiting for her to come home safe. My home. But now it was theirs. Lila's voice was soft. "We thought we'd make a clean break. Start fresh." A clean break. Like I was dirt they were washing off. I felt my chest tighten. "So that's it? After everything? You just locked me out of my own home like a stray dog." Lila looked down. "It's not like that." Adam didn't even flinch. "It's exactly like that." I stared at him, then at her. Then I bent down, picked up the bag of lemons, and placed it gently at her feet. The plastic crinkled under the weight of them. I stood tall, my hands suddenly very still. "I don't need to be let in," I said softly. "Not anymore." And I turned and walked away. Not fast. Not dramatic. Just steady. Because something had settled in me, like dust finally realizing it didn't belong in the air. By the time I reached my car, I wasn't even shaking. But my phone buzzed in my purse. A message. From Lila. "We still love you, Mom. We just need boundaries now." Boundaries. The kind that come with new locks and silence. I sat in the driver's seat and stared at the screen, her words glowing in that same cold light betrayal always wears. The same daughter I'd raised single-handedly. The same daughter whose medical bills I paid through 3 surgeries. The same daughter I co-signed a loan for last year when she and Adam were rebuilding their lives. My signature. My savings. My name. But now? I was a liability. A burden. A ghost of their old life they were ready to exorcise. I didn't cry. Not yet. I drove. Slowly. Nowhere in particular. Just driving to prove to myself I could still move forward. I ended up at the marina. The old one down by the docks where my ex-husband and I used to bring Lila to feed the seagulls on Sundays before everything went wrong. The air smelled like salt and forgotten things. I parked. Saturday. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Adam. "Hope there's no hard feelings. This is what's best for everyone." No hard feelings. The nerve. The audacity. I placed the phone on the dashboard and looked out at the water. The sun was setting, bruised orange and bruised purple, like it had been hit one too many times. It reminded me of myself. I closed my eyes and whispered, "You changed the locks, Lila, but I built the damn house." And just like that, the soft part of me that always made excuses for them cracked open. I thought back to the paperwork, the deed, the signature I had given so freely. My lawyer had warned me about irreversible transfers. "It's not just a gift," he said. "It's surrendering control." And I had laughed. "It's my daughter," I said. What could go wrong? Everything, apparently. But they didn't know the one thing I had never given away. The thing I never mentioned to Adam. Not even to Lila. The second key. To the safe deposit box. The one holding the original sale documents. The financial logs. The copies of every wire transfer I ever made on Lila's behalf. The backup of her student loan payments. The agreement Adam signed when he borrowed money from me to start fresh. All of it. I had kept them because I trusted them, but also because somewhere, deep down, I knew this day might come. They had changed the locks. But I had kept the receipts. I opened my eyes and looked out over the water. "Fine," I whispered. "Let's start fresh." And in that moment, I didn't feel like a mother anymore. I felt like a woman with nothing left to lose. And that was dangerous. Before we continue, take a moment to let me know where you're watching from in the comments, and don't forget to hit like and subscribe to more stories like this one. The next morning, I opened the box. The safe deposit key had rested in the back of my nightstand for years, taped under an old book of poetry no one had touched since Lila left for college. I peeled it off carefully, like peeling away an old version of myself. I had visited the bank exactly once a year, on my birthday. It was my tradition. A quiet check-in on everything I'd worked for. A reminder that even if the world felt unpredictable, my records were not. That key had no sentimentality. No warm memories tied to it. It was a blade. Cold. Sharp. Precise. By 9:05 a.m., I was standing in front of the vault. The bank manager, a woman named Beverly, recognized me instantly. She'd always been pleasant. One of those people who remembered your name and offered you peppermints from the jar near her computer. "Mrs. Grayson," she said with a warm smile. "Back again? I wasn't expecting you for another few months." I smiled faintly. "Change of plans." She led me to the vault with practiced ease. The heavy door swung open, and the chilled air brushed against my arms. She inserted her key first, then nodded for me to insert mine. Click. The metal box slid out with a soft hiss, and I carried it to the private viewing room. The second the door clicked shut behind me, my calm exterior fractured just slightly. I opened the lid. It was all there, neatly organized, labeled, dated. Every financial favor, every loan, every receipt of generosity I had extended to Lila and Adam over the years. $11,000 for Lila's car when she totaled her old one. $22,000 to pay off Adam's failed investment in that nutrition startup he never talked about again. $49,000 to cover the down payment when they claimed they were only a few months away from qualifying on their own. And then there was the deed. The original copy, notarized and signed the week before their wedding. I stared at it for a long time. They had begged me not to go through a lawyer. "It'll be faster this way," Adam had said. "Just family. Just trust." So I had trusted. I had trusted my daughter's face, so familiar to mine. Trusted Adam's firm handshake. Trusted that family meant more than paperwork. And now I was standing alone in a room that smelled faintly of dust and metal, holding evidence that proved I hadn't just given too much, I had given without protection. But that was about to change. I took out my phone and started scanning every page. One by one. Front and back. No detail left out. I saved the scans to a new encrypted folder on a fresh USB drive I'd bought that morning. Then I uploaded them to a cloud storage account I created under a name no one would think to look for. Redundancy. I wasn't going to let them bury this. When I walked out of the bank, the sunlight hit me like a spotlight. And I didn't shrink from it. I went home, not to their house. To my small rental. The one bedroom near the community gardens. The one I never expected to move back into after gifting my forever home away like it was candy. And I began printing. By noon, I had everything laid out on my table, like a crime board from a detective movie. Receipts, signatures, wire transfers, even text messages I had saved over the years, like the time Adam messaged me late at night. If you could just spot us the last $1,800, I swear we'll pay it back next month. You're a lifesaver. They never paid it back. Not 1 cent. I found my journal too, the one I'd kept during Lila's teen years. Inside, there were pages of notes about her surgeries, therapy appointments, the bills I handled, the teachers I met with, the breakdown I helped her recover from. The nights I slept on her floor when her anxiety was too loud to ignore. It wasn't just money I had given them. It was time.
Breath. Bone.
I held that journal for a long time. Then I began writing again. A new page. A new heading. Operation Anchor. Because if they were going to toss me overboard from the life I built, I was going to become the anchor that dragged their plans down with me. I called Dalton next, my lawyer. He answered on the third ring, his voice warm but curious. Mary? Everything all right? No, I said plainly. But I have something I need to show you. I want to come in today.
He didn't hesitate.
I'll clear the next hour. Bring everything. An hour later, I was sitting across from him, sliding the USB drive across the desk. He plugged it in and started scrolling silently. After 5 minutes, he leaned back, brows raised. This is extensive. I kept it all, I said. I just never thought I'd need it. He nodded slowly. You do now. I waited. Finally, he said, there are a few avenues we can take, depending on how aggressive you want to be. I met his eyes. Define aggressive.
He paused.
We can explore reversing the deed transfer under grounds of undue influence and financial coercion. It's hard, but not impossible with this kind of evidence. Or we could press charges. I blinked. Criminal? He nodded.
Fraud.
Elder financial abuse, depending on the state statutes. If we pursue that, there's potential jail time. I exhaled slowly. I hadn't come here for revenge. Not yet. I wanted accountability. I wanted my voice back. I want to take back what's mine, I said. And I want to make sure they never do this to anyone else. Dalton smiled faintly. Then we start with a letter. Something that makes them sweat. He began drafting a notice of intent to reclaim the property through civil action, citing improper transfer of assets, coercion, and gross financial abuse of power. You'll need to prepare for fallout, he warned. This is going to hit them hard. I hope it does, I whispered. They didn't think I'd ever say no. He glanced up. And now, I said, they're going to learn what silence really sounds like. 3 days later, the letter was delivered. Not by email, not by courier, but by certified mail, requiring a signature. Dalton's idea. He said the sound of a pen scratching across a receipt of delivery would hit harder than a dozen unread warnings.
And it did.
Because 20 minutes after it arrived, my phone rang. Lila. I stared at the screen. Let it buzz. Then voicemail. Then another call, this time from Adam. Then a text. We need to talk.
Now. I didn't respond.
Instead, I sat on the balcony of my apartment, sipping lukewarm coffee as storm clouds formed in the sky. Summer thunder in the distance. A metaphor with no subtlety at all. Dalton had called me an hour before, just to say, they received it. What was her reaction? I'd asked. She called our office 5 minutes later, demanding to speak to you directly. I smiled into the silence. Let her wait. He chuckled. That's the spirit. The letter was clear, concise, and legally devastating. A demand for immediate reversal of the deed transfer. Documentation of every dollar owed. A warning that further attempts to leverage the property or access my accounts would result in both civil litigation and criminal referral. And most damning of all, a note at the end referencing suspicious activity flagged by a financial audit already underway. Because Dalton and the investigator weren't just waiting for fireworks, they were building the fuse. I watched the clouds roll in over the city skyline. Lightning flashed quietly. The air shifted. I felt it in my bones. That sensation when you know everything is about to change, and there's no going back. Another buzz on my phone. This time, a voicemail from Lila. I didn't want to listen, but I did. Her voice was brittle, high-pitched, rehearsed. "Hi, Mom. I just got this letter and I don't understand what's going on. Are you okay? Why are you doing this? We've always been a team, haven't we?"
A pause. A breath.
"If you were upset, you should have just come to me. We could have figured something out together. This feels like you're attacking us." I paused the message there, because the next word was going to be unfair, and I didn't need to hear it. They had rewritten the definition of team. They had redefined family, turned gifts into entitlement, kindness into leverage. They had changed the locks and still wanted to keep the narrative that I was overreacting. But I wasn't reacting. Not anymore. I was responding. That night, I went for a walk around the block. The air was thick with humidity and tension. I passed neighbors watering their plants, a teenager biking with earbuds in, an old man sweeping his porch. Life continued, uninterested in the chaos brewing inside my phone. Then, as I rounded the corner back toward my building, I saw it. Lila's car, parked crookedly near the curb, hazard lights blinking like a warning. She was sitting inside, engine off, hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles looked ghostly. I stopped mid-step, watched her. She hadn't seen me yet. But then, like some sixth sense triggered her, she turned her head. Our eyes locked. She opened the door and stepped out, her heels clicking against the pavement. "Mom," she breathed, walking quickly toward me.
"Please."
I stayed still. She stopped a few feet away, arms folded. Defensive. "I didn't know you were going to escalate things." I raised an eyebrow. "Escalate? You changed the locks, Lila." She hesitated. "We needed space. We needed to set boundaries." "Then you should have bought your own house." Her lips parted, stung by the words, but I didn't let her speak. "You took my name off the door," I said, "but kept my name on your debts." She flinched. I continued. "You excluded me from my own home, told me through silence and broken promises that I wasn't part of your future. And when I finally decided to protect myself, you want to cry betrayal?" She reached out, touching my arm like we were still the same. Like time and theft could be washed away by a well-timed tear. "We didn't mean to hurt you," she whispered. "Adam just thought." I stepped back. "Adam thinks a lot of things," I said. "And most of them involve someone else footing the bill." The wind picked up. Lightning cracked above us. Lila shivered, though it wasn't cold. "I never wanted this to be ugly," she said. "Then you should have honored the beautiful things I gave you." Her eyes filled. Maybe real tears. Maybe guilt. Maybe fear. I no longer cared. "I can't undo what's been done," she said finally. "No," I said. "But I can." And with that, I turned and walked into my building, leaving her alone on the sidewalk, so close to the home she wanted, and so far from the woman who once made it all possible. Back upstairs, I shut the door behind me, locked it with the kind of click that sounded like peace. And then I did something I hadn't done in months. I poured myself a glass of red wine, not to forget, to mark the moment. This was no longer a war I was dragged into. This was the first battle I had chosen to win. The rain started just after midnight. It wasn't a stormy downpour, not yet. Just a soft, rhythmic tapping against the windows, a quiet kind of fury, restrained but constant. The kind of rain that seeps into the cracks of sidewalks and souls. I couldn't sleep. Even after my encounter with Lila, even after the locked door and the glass of wine, something in me remained awake, alert, as if waiting for another shoe to drop. Or maybe I was just finally learning to listen to the voice I'd ignored for years. The one whispering, "You gave them everything, and they took even more." I rose from bed around 2 a.m. and wandered to the bathroom. The hallway light was dim, but I didn't turn on the overhead. I looked into the mirror, the way you do when you're not trying to fix anything, not your hair, not your face, just to see the truth that hides in your eyes. The woman staring back at me wasn't fragile. Her wrinkles didn't make her soft. Her gray streaks didn't make her invisible. They made her seasoned, tempered by fire, hardened by betrayal, finally done being erased. I whispered, "You're not just someone's mother, not just their safety net." The mirror didn't answer, but something in my chest did.
And it was enough.
By morning, the rain had turned to mist, and the world outside glistened like it was rinsed clean. I brewed coffee with hands that didn't tremble anymore and opened my laptop to find a message from Dalton waiting. "Mary, the investigator has finished compiling the financial trail. It's more extensive than we initially realized. I'd like you to come in today. We need to decide what level of legal action you're willing to take next." Dalton asterisk. More extensive. I already knew what that meant. They hadn't just dipped into my kindness, they'd waded into it like a swimming pool, convinced I'd never noticed the ripple. I arrived at Dalton's office by 10. The waiting room was quiet. A soft jazz track played low over the speakers, the kind of music meant to make people forget they're sitting on the edge of war. Dalton greeted me with a somber nod and led me to his office, where a leather-bound folder sat atop his desk like a loaded weapon. "This," he said, tapping the cover, "is everything." I sat down slowly. "Show me." He opened the folder, and what spilled out made my stomach clench. There were bank records, transfer logs, screenshots of online banking access where Lila's and Adam's IP addresses had accessed my retirement and checking accounts more than 70 times in 6 months. Transactions disguised as maintenance expenses, $1,100 for a furnace repair that never happened, $3,400 to a company that turned out to be a shell business linked to Adam's name. Then there were receipts for things that had nothing to do with the house. Flights to Napa, a weekend at a spa resort in Sedona, a deposit to a luxury furniture boutique. I stared at one page in disbelief. "They bought a $2,000 sectional?" I said, my voice flat. Dalton nodded grimly. "That's not all." He slid forward another page. An email thread, recovered by the investigator, between Adam and his brother. Adam had written, "Don't worry about the cruise. Lila's mom won't be joining. She's too emotional lately. We've finally got the house squared away, so everything's smooth now. Should be able to pull a little more from the account this month, depending on how she's feeling. Might get the landscaping done before fall." I stared at the email like it was written in a foreign language. But every word made sense. It just didn't make sense. "They were coordinating how to milk me dry," I whispered, like I was some account. "You weren't a person to them," Dalton said gently. "You were an asset. Until the asset started asking questions." I sat back. I didn't cry. Not anymore. "What are my options?" I asked.
3, he said.
1. Continue with the reversal process only. You'll regain the house, lock down your accounts, and let the rest go. No public action. 2. File a civil lawsuit for financial fraud, targeting both of them jointly. That opens the door to compensation, but will likely fracture all family ties permanently. And 3. I asked, already knowing. Press criminal charges. The silence between us was thick. "I'm not interested in revenge," I said. "But I'm not going to pretend this was an accident either." Dalton nodded. "They took hundreds of thousands of dollars from you, Mary. Some of it disguised, some of it plain theft. Whether or not we call it a crime is your decision." My fingers curled around the arms of a chair. "I want to go as far as I need to go," I said. "Not an inch less." He reached for the phone. "Then I'll inform the investigator to prepare the final report and begin criminal referral prep. And the house. Legally, by Friday, it'll be yours again. All reversal documents are filed. Title reverts to you. They won't be able to refinance or sell it. The second they try, the alert will trigger." I let the weight of that settle. That house, my house, had been where I poured every memory, every dollar, every hope I had for Lila's future. I hadn't just handed her a roof and 4 walls. I handed her legacy. And she installed new locks to shut me out of it. I stood to leave. "Thank you," I said quietly. Dalton's voice was steady. "You're not the first parent who's been taken advantage of. But You are one of the few who fought back before it was too late." Before I left, he handed me a sealed envelope. "What's this?" "The original amendment to the deed transfer. Signed under duress. You'll want to keep that with your files." I walked out of the office, the folder in one hand, my purse in the other. And something strange happened as I stepped onto the sidewalk. It started to rain again, soft, steady, unbothered by the drama it fell into. And for the first time in months, I lifted my face into it and let it fall. No umbrella. No hurry. I wasn't running anymore. I was reclaiming. And as the sky opened above me, I whispered aloud. This is the part they never expected. Because I wasn't just getting my house back. I was getting myself back. By Friday morning, the keys were mine again. Real ones this time. 2 freshly cut brass keys on a plain silver ring. No decorative flair, no housewarming ribbons, just quiet power resting in my palm. Dalton handed them to me himself in his office, sliding them across the table without a smile. "They'll receive formal notification of the reversal by Monday," he said, "but the deed is already finalized. The house is legally yours. Again." He paused, then added, "Legally and indisputably." I stared at the keys. The weight of them. Familiar, but heavier now. Like the past and the present and the storm of everything between were all fused into these tiny, golden teeth that unlocked not just a door, but justice. "Thank you," I said, my voice quiet but certain. Dalton gave a slight nod. "I'd suggest going soon, before they try to sneak back in." I didn't need the warning. I was already on my way. I drove to the house just after noon. My old neighborhood looked unchanged. Tree-lined sidewalks, neatly trimmed hedges, the same crooked mailbox at the corner that had been leaning since the winter storm of '09. But the air felt different.
Thicker.
A crackling tension that came not from the clouds, but from the truth finally rising. As I turned onto the street, I slowed the car. There it was. The house I had bought after the divorce. The one I'd painted with my own hands. The one I watched Lila take her first steps in, years ago, her baby curls bouncing as she stumbled toward the open kitchen. It was beautiful. Still. Even after what had happened. And yet, it was also hollow. The way a stage feels after the curtain drops. I parked across the street and sat there for a long moment, watching it. Watching them. Because their car was still in the driveway. They hadn't moved out. Of course they hadn't. Why would they? They didn't yet know the locks had changed hands again. But they would. I exited the car slowly, deliberately. As I approached the house, I spotted Lila through the front window, sitting on the couch, typing something on her phone, probably one of her dozen follow-up messages I'd already ignored. I walked up the steps and stood at the front door. And I used the key.
Click.
The sound was quiet, just metal and precision, but it thundered through me like a drumbeat. The door opened. And inside stood Adam, frozen in the hallway, a glass of water in his hand, ice cubes clinking from the shock. His mouth opened, but no words came. "Hello, Adam," I said calmly, stepping inside. Lila appeared behind him, barefoot, her face pale. "Mom," she said. "You can't just—" "Yes," I said, cutting her off gently. "I can." And I did. Adam stepped forward, jaw tight. "You're trespassing."
No.
"I'm not." I pulled the folder from my bag and held it out. "As of 9:17 a.m. this morning, this property is solely in my name. The deed has been reversed. Every financial authorization revoked. Every access removed. You no longer live here. Not legally. Not financially. Not in any way that matters." Lila's hand flew to her mouth. "That's not possible. You can't just take it back." "I didn't take it back," I said. "I took it back from the people who stole it." I laid the folder on the hallway table and walked past them, my step steady as I passed into the living room, my living room, where the same throw blanket I'd knitted 2 winters ago still sat on the arm of the couch. Adam started pacing. "This isn't over. We have rights. We've been living here for months." You've been living off me," I said. "You've been laundering gifts into entitlement, turning generosity into exploitation. And now the lights are on, and the show is over. Lila's eyes filled. You didn't even warn us. You warned me, I snapped, turning to face her fully now. When you changed the locks. When you locked me out of the house I gave you. When you told me I needed boundaries. That was your warning. You just didn't realize it was the final one. For a moment, the only sound was the tick of the hallway clock. Then Adam muttered under his breath, You'll regret this. I turned my eyes to him.
Calm. Clear.
Unshaken. No, I said. I regret trusting people who turned my love into a credit line. I regret thinking silence was protection. But this?
No.
This I'll sleep well with. I reached into my bag and pulled out a copy of the final notice Dalton had prepared. This gives you 72 hours to vacate, I said. After that, legal removal will begin. I'm being generous by offering the time. Lila stepped forward now, her face pleading. Mom, please, can't we just talk? Just us. I looked at her. At the daughter I once stayed up all night for during her freshman year of college because she was afraid of failing her chemistry final. At the girl who used to sing off-key in the car with me, barefoot and free. The child I carried through heartbreak, depression, debt, divorce, all of it.
And now?
Now she wanted to talk, only because the castle she built on my back was crumbling. I said nothing. Instead, I turned and walked toward the door. As I opened it, I paused, one hand still on the frame. I suggest you use the 72 hours wisely, I said, not turning around. Because this is no longer your story. It's mine. And then I stepped outside into the fresh air. Into freedom. Into the start of something they never thought I had the strength to write. They were gone by Sunday afternoon. No note. No goodbye. Just silence, the kind they used to punish me with when they wanted something. But this time, the silence was mine to enjoy. I stood in the doorway and watched as the moving truck rolled away, its taillights disappearing around the corner like the last trickle of a storm that finally ran out of lies. 72 hours. That's what they were given. And they didn't dare test it. Dalton had made it clear in the final notice. Any refusal to vacate will result in a formal eviction proceeding and the full weight of criminal exposure. The letter was delivered via email and hand-delivered by a process server who, by all accounts, said Adam, turned a color not usually found in nature when he opened the door. Now, the house was quiet again. Not peaceful yet, but quiet. I stepped inside slowly, unsure of what I'd find. I expected anger, petty damage, a mess meant to provoke a reaction. And I wasn't wrong. The living room furniture was gone, all except the antique coffee table I had inherited from my grandmother. Apparently, it wasn't modern enough for resale.
Good.
I didn't want their taste here anyway. In the hallway, I noticed the coat hooks had been ripped from the wall. Childish. Spiteful. The kitchen smelled like something had been left too long in the trash, which turned out to be an entire fridge of spoiled produce. I held my breath and took the garbage out myself. Because unlike them, I could still clean up my own mess. But it wasn't just the filth they left behind.
It was what they didn't take.
In the bedroom upstairs, I found an old shoebox shoved in the back of the closet. Inside were letters, ones I had written to Lila over the years. Birthday cards, notes slipped into her school lunches, college care packages. Even the just checking in cards I used to send when she first moved in with Adam and didn't call me for weeks. She had kept them. Unread, maybe, but kept. And for a moment, that truth cut deeper than anything else. Because love like mine doesn't just vanish. It gets stored away, like an obligation you don't know how to throw out. I sat on the edge of the bed with the box in my lap, unsure whether to feel grief or fury or some unnameable emotion suspended in between. That's when I heard the ding. My phone lit up on the dresser with a message from Dalton. Mary, just confirming, we've completed the formal title recording with the county clerk. The property is now 100% under your name with no contest filed. On another note, the financial investigation report is finalized. When you're ready, I'd like to walk you through it. I stared at the screen. No contest filed. Of course not. They weren't brave enough to fight me in public. That would require truth, and they'd built their entire scheme on the absence of it. I stood and walked through the house, room by room, collecting what was mine and noting what needed to be replaced. The second guest room had holes punched in the drywall. The office had missing light bulbs. A few drawers in the kitchen had been pulled off their tracks. But they hadn't touched the safe room. Tucked behind a cabinet in the den, the one I installed years ago when I still believed in the kind of safety you could buy, was a small door with a keypad. Still intact. Still hidden. I entered the code. Inside, everything remained exactly as I'd left it. The backup drive containing all of Lila's student records. My late mother's engagement ring. The signed promissory note Adam gave me when I loaned him $20,000 to invest in a tech fund. And a sealed letter from my own mother, written before she passed, one I had never opened because I wasn't ready.
But now?
Now I was ready for everything. I opened the envelope gently, unfolding the yellowing paper with trembling hands. Her handwriting was tight and deliberate. Asterisk Mary. If you're reading this, I hope it's because you've found peace, not pain. I know how hard it is to love people who forget you're a person. I hope you never let anyone define your worth by how useful you are to them. Love deeply, but don't disappear in the process. Asterisk. You are not a bank. You are not a housekeeper. You are not a bridge for people to burn and rebuild only when they need a shortcut. You are my daughter, and you deserve to be seen. Mama asterisk. I sat on the floor of the safe room, my knees pulled to my chest, the letter against my heart. It wasn't just a note. It was permission. Permission to stop proving myself. Permission to stop bleeding for people who'd never stop asking for more. When I finally stood, I wasn't the same woman who walked in. I was someone reborn. I called Dalton. Let's meet tomorrow, I said. I want to go through the full report. Every dollar. Every lie. Are you sure? He asked. It's not easy reading. I'm sure, I said. I've read their version long enough. I'm ready for the truth. He paused, then said, I've also been in touch with the district attorney's office. The report is enough to open a preliminary case if you decide to go forward. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. Let's keep that door open, I said. I'm not out for blood, but I'm done letting predators call themselves family. After I hung up, I returned to the living room and lit a single candle. Not for memory, for clarity, because the shadows that used to scare me, they were gone. I wasn't afraid of darkness anymore. I was just done sitting quietly in it. Dalton laid the report out in front of me like a surgeon presenting x-rays. Clinical, measured, prepared to dissect the truth, no matter how ugly it looked under the light. We sat in a small side room at his firm. No windows, just silence, save for the low hum of the ceiling fan above us and the occasional scratch of his pen as he underlined numbers that didn't belong. This, he said, tapping the first page, is what we're calling the entry wound. It was a bank transfer, $2,750, labeled roof repair. A payment to a company that, according to the investigator, didn't exist beyond a P.O. box in Colorado and a website that had gone dark 2 years ago. Adam created the shell company, Dalton said. Filed under a business entity he controls through his brother. We confirmed it using the IP logs tied to your online banking profile. Same login credentials Emily used. I flinched at the name, not because I feared it, but because it still hurt to hear my daughter reduced to a conspirator. To someone who chose to close the door between us and call it peace. Dalton flipped the page. Then we have this one, $4,300 labeled property tax overage, rerouted into a joint savings account with both of their names on it. That account, by the way, has since been drained. He paused, watching me for a reaction. I didn't give him one. I didn't need to. My silence wasn't shock anymore. It was strategy. You want to know what stings the most? I finally said, my voice low. They didn't even try to be clever. Dalton gave a half smile, the tired kind. People rarely do when they assume you'll never fight back. We spent 2 hours combing through it all. Every page a scar. Every line item a betrayal I had once paid for willingly, groceries, tuition, utilities, and now realized had been converted into weapons. Dalton showed me the cash withdrawals next, always in small, calculated amounts. just under the thresholds that would trigger alerts. $920 here, $810 there, $600, sometimes twice in a week, all labeled as shared home expenses. Then came the worst page, a check.
Written in my handwriting.
Except I hadn't written it. Dalton slid it toward me gently. They forged your signature. I stared at the photocopy. The loop in the M was wrong. The curl of the Y too shallow. It was like watching someone imitate your voice and get it just wrong enough to make your skin crawl. This was used to authorize the initial deposit for the second mortgage, Dalton said. They were preparing to borrow against your house with your forged approval. How close did they get? I asked. They were 3 days away from full approval when the reversal froze the property's legal status. I sat back in the chair, the breath escaping my lungs slowly, deliberately. 3 days. 3 days from losing everything I'd spent a lifetime building. You said last time the DA was interested. Dalton nodded. They've reviewed the report and are opening a preliminary fraud case file. No charges yet, they're waiting on you. If you sign off, they'll open an official investigation. I glanced down at the report. It didn't feel like paperwork anymore. It felt like evidence at a crime scene. My life, outlined in transactions and dates, like chalk outlines around trust that had been murdered in broad daylight. I looked up. I'll sign. Dalton handed me the form, a single sheet of paper with one line for my signature at the bottom. Request for criminal prosecution, financial elder abuse, and fraud. I signed without hesitation, because calling it a family misunderstanding was the lie that got me here in the first place. When I left his office, the clouds were hanging low again, but no rain had fallen. Just like before. A hush. A warning. I got into my car and drove. Not home. Not yet. Instead, I drove to the diner Lila, and I used to visit every Sunday after church when she was 12. The kind with cracked red leather booths and waitresses who called you Han whether they knew your name or not. The owner, Joyce, still remembered me. She greeted me with a hug and a soft, "It's been too long, Mary." I sat in the booth by the window and ordered a coffee, black. No sugar. No cream. Just truth. I stared at the empty seat across from me. I remembered when Lila used to sit there, swinging her legs beneath the table, too short to touch the ground. She'd beg for pancakes and doodle with crayons on the paper menu while I told her stories about how strong women always survive. And I wondered, did she ever think I meant myself? I sipped my coffee and watched the parking lot. A mother stepped out of a minivan with 2 kids in tow. One of them slipped and fell on the curb, and the mother scooped him up with practiced grace, brushing gravel from his palms and whispering something only he could hear. I felt the sting behind my eyes, sharp and unexpected. Not because I missed Lila, but because I missed being needed. Not used. Not taken for granted, but truly needed. Joyce came by with the check and smiled softly. Whatever storm you're walking through, Han, I hope you remember, storms don't last. But neither does silence. I nodded. I'm not silent anymore. And as I stepped out into the gray afternoon, I realized something important. The woman who once gave everything had finally taken something back. Her name.
Her spine.
Her worth. And I was just getting started. The letter came on a Tuesday. Not from Lila. Not from Adam. But from a lawyer bearing their last name. I found the envelope stuffed in my mailbox like an afterthought, tucked between a gardening catalog and a coupon flyer, as if it were just another meaningless piece of mail. But the return address stopped me cold. Morris and Whitfield Family Council. I didn't open it right there. I took it upstairs, placed it gently on the kitchen counter, and stared at it like it might explode. Something told me I needed to see it for what it really was, not an olive branch. Not an apology. A weapon. Dressed in legal formatting and backhanded civility. Eventually, I slid it open with the edge of a butter knife and unfolded the pages. The tone was polished. Measured. Crafted by someone who'd been paid to make theft sound like inconvenience and betrayal sound like misunderstanding. Dear Ms. Grayson, we represent your daughter and son-in-law, Lila and Adam Whitfield, In regards to your recent actions pertaining to the ownership of the property at address redacted and your stated intentions to pursue litigation for alleged financial misconduct. Our clients are disheartened by the unexpected escalation of what they believed to be familial matters of mutual support and trust. While they acknowledge a temporary lapse in communication, they assert that no malicious intent was present. Their use of shared funds and access to property was, at all times, under the belief that such access had been granted with your full awareness and blessing. We strongly urge reconsideration of legal proceedings and request a meeting to mediate matters privately to avoid irreparable damage to family ties and potential public fallout. Sincerely, Ethan Morris, ESQ. Morris and Whitfield Family Council. I read it twice, then a third time, slower. And by the end, my hands didn't shake, they clenched. Temporary lapse in communication. That's what they were calling it now. Locking me out of my home, stealing from my accounts, forging my signature. That was a lapse. Believed to be under the impression of permission. As if I had ever said the words, "Feel free to siphon my retirement while I knit in silence." I sat down slowly and folded the letter back into the envelope, as gently as if I were tucking a corpse into a coffin.
They weren't just gaslighting me,
They were trying to rewrite the ending.
but the pen was in my hand now.
I called Dalton immediately. They've lawyered up, I said, trying to play it soft. Mediation. He didn't sound surprised.
Of course they are, he said.
That's what people do when they think charm can clean blood off the carpet. But the report speaks for itself. I nodded. Even though he couldn't see me, I want everything documented. No mediation behind closed doors. No conversations that don't leave a paper trail. We're already ahead of them, Dalton said. The DA is preparing their file. But just so you're aware, if they sense an indictment coming, they may attempt a public counter-narrative. What does that mean? It means, he said, they'll play the sympathy card. Start talking about your mental health, your age, your confusion. They'll try to make you look like a bitter woman lashing out at her children out of loneliness or senility. I felt something ice-cold settle in my spine, because I had seen it happen to women like me, to widows and mothers and retirees who had once been the backbone of families, only to be labeled difficult, emotional, unstable the second they started defending themselves. They can try, I said, but they better come prepared to answer for every dollar. Dalton paused. There's one more thing, he said. The bank flagged a suspicious new joint application for a personal loan under your name. Filed yesterday. It was denied. But it tells me one thing. They're getting desperate. Exactly. That night, I went through my memory box, not the digital one in the safe, but the real one. A battered cedar chest that used to sit at the foot of my bed, now tucked in the back of the guest room closet. Inside were layers of Lila's life. Her baby booties. The drawing she made in second grade of our old house, a lopsided crayon sketch with windows like eyes and a crooked smile of a front door. Letters from summer camp. Her college acceptance email, printed and framed because she asked me to. I had kept it all. I had kept her, even when she was trying to let me go. But now I saw it differently. These weren't memories. They were exhibits. Proof that I had loved her, raised her, given her everything I had and more. I pulled out one letter in particular, her thank you card from her wedding day. The last sentence read, "You're the reason we have a home. You'll always be part of it." I traced my finger over the words, not because I believed them anymore, but because I wanted to remember the version of her who once meant them. If such a version had ever existed. Then I slipped the letter into my folder of documentation. If they were going to take me to court with a story, I was going to meet them there with a timeline. 2 days later, a local reporter left a voicemail. "Ms. Grayson, we received a tip about a developing civil matter involving a property dispute between you and your daughter. If you'd like to offer your side of the story before it's published, please give us a call." There it was, the sympathy narrative, taking shape, probably fed to the press by the same lawyer who'd penned that sugar-coated threat. I didn't call back right away. Instead, I waited, and I wrote everything. My side. The real side. I wasn't looking for revenge. I was looking for the truth to stand on its own legs. And I wasn't going to let my silence be weaponized anymore. If they wanted a spotlight, I'd meet them in it, not as a sob story, but as a woman who finally stopped apologizing for saying, "No more." The article went live on a Thursday. It wasn't front page, but it might as well have been. The headline sat nestled between fluff pieces about a local bakery expansion and a write-up on the mayor's re-election campaign. Elderly mother in legal battle with daughter over home ownership dispute. Family rift raises questions about power of attorney, financial boundaries, and the quiet cost of generosity. I read the whole thing in one sitting, seated on my back porch with a blanket across my knees and a mug of lukewarm tea I'd forgotten to drink. The reporter had tried to be neutral, I could tell. But the phrasing still stung. Sources close to the family suggest the dispute may stem from misunderstandings regarding previously shared financial responsibilities. According to legal documents obtained through public record, the daughter and son-in-law maintain that the property transfer was permanent and freely given. Misunderstandings. Freely given. No mention of forged checks. No mention of stolen retirement. No mention of the woman who paid for everything being locked out of her own life, like a tenant late on rent. And yet, the final paragraph gave me something. Asterisk, Mrs. Grayson declined an interview, but submitted the following written statement. When you give your heart, your time, and your savings to your family, you don't expect a thank you. But you do expect honesty. I didn't lose a house, I reclaimed my name. And I won't let anyone else write my story for me again. Asterisk. I had written those words the night before. A single paragraph. No frills. No rage. Just truth. And now it was published. They had taken my voice once. Not anymore. The phone calls started 2 hours later. Friends from the neighborhood. A cousin I hadn't heard from in 6 years. Even the owner of the florist shop downtown, who offered me a bouquet on the house because, as she put it, sometimes you have to plant new things after a storm. But the message that came next wasn't from a friend. It was from Lila. No greeting. No preamble. Just cold text on a screen. You're humiliating us publicly now? We tried to settle this with dignity. You want to throw your daughter under the bus for sympathy clicks? I stared at the message. Then another came. You have no idea what you've done. Adam lost his consulting contract because of this. I might lose my job too. Is that what you wanted? No apology. No ownership. Just panic. The sound a mask makes when it slips.
I didn't respond.
Not because I didn't have words, but because some silences are surgical, meant to cut clean through what someone thinks they deserve. Instead, I forwarded the text to Dalton. He called within minutes. They're cracking, he said. I know. Do you want to respond? No, I said. I want them to keep talking. People show you who they are when they think you owe them something. He hesitated, then said, There's something else. The district attorney's office has formally opened a case file. They want to schedule a preliminary interview with you. Would you be willing? I took a breath. I'll do it. Okay. I'll set it up for early next week. It'll be quiet. No press. Good, I said. Let's keep the noise where it belongs. That evening, I visited the garden behind the library, the one I used to volunteer at before everything fell apart. Rows of lavender and rosemary, tomato vines crawling up hand-built trellises. It still smelled like patience and old soil. As I walked the paths, I passed a woman hunched near a bed of zinnias. She looked up and gasped softly. Mary? It took me a moment. Then I recognized her, Dana, a retired schoolteacher who used to garden with me on Saturdays. I saw the article, she said gently, standing to wipe dirt from her hands. I didn't know everything, but I'm glad you're standing up for yourself. I smiled faintly. Took me long enough. She reached out and squeezed my hand. You always planted everything so carefully, she said. Funny how even the strongest flowers can still grow in soil that tried to bury them. We stood in silence, watching bees drift between petals like they had nothing to prove. And in that moment, I understood something. I had been made to believe that speaking up meant I didn't love them. But silence isn't love. It's permission. And I wasn't giving it anymore. The next morning, Dalton emailed me a new update. The DA's office had scheduled my statement for the following Tuesday. He would be present. The investigator would be there too. It wasn't a trial, just the start of one. I stared at the calendar on the wall. The date blinked back at me like a line I had drawn in the sand. Tuesday would be the day I said everything under oath. The day I made it real. And if Lila and Adam thought their names would stay clean, they hadn't read the fine print. Because this time, I was telling all of it. No edits. No sugar. Just the truth. The courthouse didn't look like a battlefield. It was all glass doors and beige walls and those tired blue chairs that creak when you shift in them. A receptionist with acrylic nails tapped at a keyboard. A water cooler bubbled gently in the corner. But make no mistake, this was where the war began. Dalton met me on the front steps, folder in hand, tie perfectly centered. He looked me over with the same careful eye he used when scanning documents. "You ready?" he asked. I adjusted the sleeves of my navy cardigan. It had once belonged to my mother. She wore it the day she finalized her will. There was something poetic about that. "I've never been more ready." He nodded. "They'll keep it informal for now. Just a preliminary statement to the DA and their financial crimes investigator. No cameras. No defense attorneys. Just your truth." "Good," I said. "Because I'm not here to perform." Inside, they brought us to a small conference room, low lighting, a round table, a pitcher of water at the center like it was meant to offer comfort. The DA, a woman named Sandra Patel, entered a few minutes later. She was maybe in her mid-40s, sharp eyes and an even sharper posture. Behind her came Marcus Hahn, the financial crimes investigator. He had already gone through the audit report with Dalton, but now he wanted to hear it from me, in my voice, in my words. Sandra gave a polite smile. "Mrs. Grayson, thank you for coming in."
"Please," I said.
"Call me Mary." She nodded. "And I'll call you Brave."
I didn't respond to that.
I didn't feel brave. I just felt done letting other people narrate my life. Marcus began. "We'd like to walk through a timeline. In your own words, how the house was gifted, how the accounts were managed, when you began to suspect something was wrong." I took a deep breath. And I began. I told them everything. From the day I handed Lila and Adam the house deed, framed and wrapped in silver ribbon, to the moment I stood outside my own front door, key no longer working, groceries in hand, heart thudding like I'd been robbed in broad daylight. I recounted how I handed over account access under the guise of making retirement easier. How Lila insisted I shouldn't have to worry about the little things anymore. How Adam always said, "We'll take care of you, Mary, we owe you that." How it all sounded like love at the time. Until it wasn't. I described the small transactions I didn't notice. Then the larger ones I excused. Then the forgery. The fake repair invoices. The attempt to secure a second mortgage using a check I never wrote. I watched Sandra's expression change by the minute, from neutral to sharp to something I recognized. Fury in a measured cup. "Do you have documentation of these events?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "Every one." Dalton slid the folder across the table like a final move in a long game of chess. Marcus flipped through it methodically. He stopped when he reached the forged check. "She used your signature style," he murmured. "She used my trust," I replied. Sandra looked up. "Would you be willing to testify to everything you've said today? In court, under oath." My answer came without hesitation. "Yes." She nodded. "Then we'll move forward. It won't be overnight. These cases take time. But you've given us more than enough to open formal charges." Dalton leaned in. "Will you be pursuing both of them?" "We have to," Sandra said. Based on the evidence, they acted in concert. Financial collusion.
Fraud.
Possibly elder financial abuse under state statute. The words felt heavy and electric all at once.
Fraud.
Collusion. Abuse. Words I once thought only applied to strangers in headlines. Not my daughter. Not the man I once called family. But now, they weren't just words. They were truths. When the session ended, Sandra stood and extended her hand. "I'm sorry this happened to you, Mary." I shook it. "I'm not." She blinked. You're not. No, I said quietly, because it finally made me stop pretending. Outside, the air was colder than it had been that morning. Leaves scuttled across the pavement like tiny messengers.
Change was coming.
Dalton walked beside me as we headed back to the car. Once this becomes public, he said carefully, you'll need to be prepared. People will choose sides. I know. They'll say you should have forgiven her. That family is sacred. That you're bitter. I know, I said again. He stopped walking. You sure you want to go through with this? I turned to him. My daughter looked me in the face. I said, while my account's emptied, while my name disappeared from the house, while she called it a fresh start. She changed the locks, Dalton. That wasn't the misunderstanding. That was a message. He nodded. No more arguments. When I got home, I poured myself a fresh cup of tea and stood in the doorway of the guest room, the one I used to call Lila's room.
It was empty now.
But it didn't feel hollow anymore. It felt clean. I opened the closet, pulled out a box labeled Christmas, and started organizing the lights, untangling the cords one by one. Because life doesn't stop when you take your power back. You just stop asking permission to live it. The subpoena landed a week later. This time, it wasn't tucked between coupons. It came by certified courier, signed for, timestamped. Official. Adam and Lila were being formally charged with 2 counts of financial fraud, 1 count of check forgery, and 1 count of elder financial abuse under state statute. The charges were real. The silence that followed was louder. No angry texts. No voicemails. Not even one of Lila's long-winded guilt bombs cloaked in "We're still a family." Just nothing. Until the interview aired. A blurry Thursday evening, not even sweeps week, but there they were. A small local news segment titled, Daughter Denies Financial Abuse Claims Amid Family Dispute Over Property. I didn't watch it live. A friend from the community garden called and said, Mary, they're spinning it. Hard. So I opened my laptop and watched. Lila sat in a living room I didn't recognize, clean lines, staged pillows, probably borrowed for sympathy optics. Her hair was curled, makeup natural, eyes puffy enough to look human, but not guilty. The interviewer's voice came through. You've been accused of stealing from your mother. How do you respond to that? Lila inhaled, slow and deliberate. It breaks my heart, she said. My mom, she's always been generous. But she's also always been emotional. I think after my dad died, she never really healed. She became possessive. Of me. Of what she gave us. Possessive. My mouth went dry. She continued. The house was a gift. We never asked for it. She insisted. She called it her legacy. I think, when we started setting boundaries, it triggered something in her. We never imagined it would go this far. The reporter nodded, sympathetic. But there's financial documentation suggesting unauthorized use of her accounts. Lila didn't miss a beat. Everything we did was with her verbal consent. We managed her bills. We helped coordinate home maintenance. She thanked us many times. And then, I don't know, something changed. And then, the dagger. I think she's lonely. I think she needs help, and instead of asking, she's lashing out. The screen cut to a brief clip of Adam. No suit, no tie, just a button-down shirt and a furrowed brow. We never stole from her, he said. That house was her way of saying thank you. She told us we deserved it. The clip ended there. I closed the laptop. Not in rage. In mourning. Because that was the version of me they were choosing. The lonely widow. The confused elder. The burden who finally became inconvenient. I didn't cry. I didn't throw anything. I simply walked into the guest room, opened my file drawer, and retrieved the original thank you letter Adam had written after the house transfer. We don't deserve this. We're so grateful. We'll take care of this house like you took care of us. I placed it beside the forged check, side by side, a perfect before and after of intent. Later that evening, Dalton called. You saw it. I did. I've already drafted a rebuttal if you're open to a public statement. I'm not, I said. Not yet. You sure?
Yes.
Let them finish their version of the story. Because when the trial begins, the only version that matters will be sworn under oath. The next morning, I went to the house. My house. It had been weeks since I returned with any sense of permanence. I'd spent time in my apartment, healing in solitude. But now I needed to walk through the space as its owner again, not as a woman tiptoeing around old ghosts. The first thing I did was change the locks. Again. Not because they were faulty, but because I didn't want even the memory of their keys near my doors. Then I repainted the front entry. It had been pale gray, Lila's choice, which she once called neutral but sophisticated. I painted it sunflower yellow.
Loud. Warm.
Unapologetic. Just like I was learning to be. As the paint dried, I opened the windows, letting light pour through the living room. The one that used to house the white sectional Adam insisted on. Now it was empty, save for a thrifted armchair and a new rug I bought with my own checkbook. The kind of rug no one else picked out. The kind of rug that didn't match anyone's aesthetic but mine. I sat on the floor and thought about everything I had lost and everything I had taken back. It hadn't just been the house. It had been me. I had handed over my voice one gentle favor at a time.
Can you co-sign?
Can you manage the bills? Can we use your account just once more? And with every yes, I became smaller. Until one day I was locked outside, staring through a door I paid for, while they smiled through the glass like hosts of a party I was never invited to.
But now?
I own the locks, and the party was over. Later that evening, a package arrived. No note, just a padded envelope with my name handwritten across the front. Inside, a photo album. Old pictures. Childhood. Vacations. Birthdays. Lila blowing out candles at age 8. Her arms around me on graduation day. Adam grinning awkwardly at our first family Thanksgiving. Taped to the back cover was a yellow sticky note. We wanted you to remember the good times. Before things got twisted. Twisted. That's what they called my reclamation. Twisted. As if standing up from a kneeling position is somehow a betrayal. I closed the album and returned it to its envelope. I didn't throw it away, but I didn't put it on the shelf either. Because sometimes history isn't for display. It's for context. And I had finally learned how to separate memory from manipulation. As the sun set beyond the treeline, I stood in the quiet, watching the light fade. And I whispered aloud, not for them, but for myself. I know who I am. Let them frame me however they like. Because when the truth walks into the courtroom, it doesn't need a filter. It was raining the day I walked into the courthouse. Not a soft drizzle or some cinematic mist. No, this was real rain. Heavy, cold, unforgiving. The kind that soaks your coat and your bones if you stand still too long. But I didn't bring an umbrella. I didn't need one. Not today. Because I wasn't showing up as someone needing cover. I was showing up as a witness. The state had filed formal charges against Adam and Lila, fraud, forgery, and financial abuse of a dependent adult. The courtroom wasn't full, just a few benches of legal staff, reporters, and distant onlookers, but it felt packed with years. Years of dinners I paid for, vacations I funded, birthdays I hosted in the house they'd later call theirs. Every gift, every silent compromise, now sitting in evidence folders lined up behind the prosecution's table. Dalton met me in the lobby with a steady nod. His briefcase in one hand, the expression of a man prepared to go to war with paper and precedent. "They're both here," he said quietly. I nodded once. I didn't ask where. He led me down the hall to a small holding room where I would wait before being called. It smelled of coffee and cold metal chairs, and the lights buzzed slightly overhead. I didn't sit. I paced. Because if I sat, I'd start thinking of Lila's third-grade piano recital. Or the time she fell off her bike and I carried her home, my arms burning but my voice steady as I promised she'd be okay.
I didn't want to think about any of that now.
I needed to remember the woman who locked me out of my own house. The one who sent forged checks to the bank and smiled while I served her tea in the kitchen I paid for. The bailiff came in 20 minutes later. "They're ready." I followed without hesitation. The courtroom was hushed. Adam and Lila sat at the defense table, looking smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I had just grown. Lila wore navy, her hair pinned back neatly. Not the wild curls she used to let me braid while she read me library books. Her face was tight, lips a flat line, shoulders squared like she expected to be congratulated for showing up. Adam didn't look at me at all. Good. I took my seat beside Dalton and waited. The judge entered. The case was called. Then my name. The DA, Sandra Patel, rose and gestured. The prosecution would like to call Mary Grayson to the stand. I walked past them slowly. Past Lila's rigid silence. Past Adam's clenched jaw. I didn't stop. I didn't hesitate. The bailiff held the Bible. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do. And then I sat. The courtroom seemed to shrink as Sandra approached with a notepad in hand. Mrs. Grayson, she began, voice clear, can you describe for the court your relationship to the defendants?
My daughter, I said.
And her husband. And how would you describe your financial relationship over the past 5 years? Generous, I said plainly, unquestioning, and eventually manipulated. There were murmurs in the gallery. The judge raised a hand for silence. Sandra nodded. You gifted them a house? Yes. Fully paid? Yes. Did you expect anything in return? No, I said. Only respect. And perhaps conclusion. A pause. Can you describe what changed? I told them. Every bit of it. How they locked me out. How they linked accounts. How they borrowed under my name. How they spent my savings while telling me they were streamlining the bills. How I signed over a deed out of love and got silence in return. And did you give permission for them to take out a second mortgage?
Sandra asked. No.
Did you authorize the forged check?
No.
Did you give them access to your retirement account? Temporarily, I said. I revoked it the moment I realized it was being used for things I never approved. What things? Private vacations, furniture, spa treatments, all while telling me they were struggling to pay for home repairs. I looked directly at Lila now. She didn't blink, just stared back like I was a stranger on a witness stand. And in that moment, I finally accepted that I was. Sandra gestured to the documents submitted into evidence. Your financial records, the private investigator's report, and the forged check all confirm your claims. But in your own words, Mrs. Grayson, what does this case mean to you? I took a breath, then another, and then I said it. It means I stopped apologizing for asking not to be stolen from. It means I stopped calling theft a misunderstanding just because it came with a family photo attached. It means that love, real love, doesn't require silence. The courtroom was so still, you could hear the ink in Sandra's pen freeze. No further questions, she said softly. The judge turned to the defense. Lila's lawyer stood, a young woman with big eyes and a briefcase too shiny to have seen real fights. She smiled, like I was a frail old woman who needed softening. Mrs. Grayson, you mentioned your emotions several times. Would you say you've been feeling isolated since your husband passed? Dalton tensed beside me. I did not. Are you implying I imagined a forged check? She blinked. No, Or that I hallucinated a second mortgage application using my social security number? No, of course not. Then perhaps we should focus on what's written in ink, not what's assumed about age. She swallowed. No further questions. As I stepped down, I passed the defense table again. Adam stared at his lap, but Lila looked up, and for the briefest second, I saw something flicker behind her eyes. It wasn't remorse. It was fear, not of prison, but of me. Because for the first time in her life, I wasn't handing her a lifeline. I was walking out of the fire, alone, and stronger than she ever imagined. The verdict came 8 weeks later. It was a quiet Monday morning. I was in the garden, clipping deadheads for my marigolds when the phone rang. I didn't rush to answer it, not because I didn't care, but because the outcome wouldn't define me anymore. Still, when I heard Dalton's voice, steady and clear, I stood a little taller. They took a deal, he said. I leaned on the porch rail. Tell me. Adam has accepted full responsibility for the forged check and fraudulent financial access. Lila signed a statement admitting to misuse of durable power of attorney and agreed to pay restitution. And charges? I asked. Reduced, but still on record. Adam gets probation, fines, and community service. Lila avoids jail time, but she's legally barred from accessing her accounts or estate ever again. I let that settle. Not victory. Closure. What about the house? Dalton chuckled softly. Yours, with full title security. They've forfeited all claims. You're protected. Ironclad. I thanked him and hung up. No tears. No gloating. Just a long exhale into the crisp morning air. Because justice hadn't come with a bang. It came with clarity. I went back to my garden, the soil damp, the light golden and low. I could feel autumn in the breeze, that hushed moment when things begin to shed not because they're dying, but because they're done holding on.
Like me.
Later that afternoon, I found the letter. Not from a lawyer. From Lila. Handwritten. Folded into thirds. Slipped into my mailbox without postage, like it couldn't bear the weight of official channels. I almost didn't open it. But I did. Mom. I don't know how to explain what happened. We were overwhelmed. We were scared. And maybe, yes, we were greedy. We justified things to ourselves. Told each other we were helping you by taking things off your plate. We weren't. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even know if I deserve your voice again. But I needed you to know I was wrong. I'm sorry I let Adam lead. I'm sorry I followed. I'm sorry I changed the locks and made you feel small in the home you built. You were never the burden. You were the foundation. If this is goodbye, then I understand. But I wanted you to know I remember everything. Lila. I sat with that letter for a long time. It didn't fix anything. But it didn't have to. Because I wasn't standing at the beginning of something fragile anymore. I was standing at the end of a long chapter. One where love was confused with silence and loyalty mistaken for surrender. And I had turned the final page. The following week, I sold the house. Not because I had to, but because I wanted the space. Not just the square footage, the emotional square footage. Space that didn't echo with betrayal under every floorboard. The new owners were a young couple expecting their first child. When they walked through the front door, their faces lit up like I remembered Lila's did the day I handed her the keys. But this time, I wasn't offering it as a sacrifice. I was offering it as a sale.
Clean. Fair.
Equal. I closed the door behind me for the last time, my fingers grazing the now yellow entryway as I whispered a quiet goodbye. Not to them. To the version of me who had once called this place home. I moved into a small seaside cottage just north of town. 1 bedroom. Tall windows. A porch that creaked under my feet like it had a story to tell. I painted the front door sunflower yellow, again because peace deserves consistency. My days became quiet in the best way. I woke early, baked bread, volunteered at the community library, took long walks barefoot in the sand. I began writing again, little essays and reflections tucked into a notebook I never planned to publish. And one evening, just as the sun was dropping below the horizon, I pulled out a sheet of paper and wrote a letter. Not to send, not to forgive, just to say the things I hadn't yet. Lila, there is a difference between consequences and cruelty. What happened wasn't revenge. It was accountability. I raised you to believe in boundaries and truth. I just forgot to apply them to myself. That mistake won't be made again. I wish you peace. But from here, not from within. You changed the locks on me once. But I was the one who held the blueprint. You don't get to rewrite who I am. Not anymore.
Mom.
I folded it, placed it in a box with Lila's old school drawings, a few family photos, and one final keepsake, the original set of keys to the house they once took. I locked the box, not to bury it, but to preserve it. Because this story, though scarred, deserved to be remembered in full, not edited for comfort. And the woman who lived through it? She wasn't broken. She wasn't bitter. She was free. The next morning, I stepped out onto my porch and turned the key to lock the front door behind me, not in fear, but in ritual. A final, simple truth. That was the last lock I ever turned. If this story moved you or reminded you of your own strength, you're not alone. This channel is a place for stories that speak to the soul. Drop a comment, hit that like button, and subscribe so we can keep growing this community of truth, resilience, and powerful voices together.